In this presentation, we'll record a transaction related to pledges receivable within QuickBooks Pro, QuickBooks Desktop. Here we are in our Practice QuickBooks file. We currently have the open windows open. You can open the open windows by going to the View drop-down up top and selecting the Open Windows list. We're now going to go down to our Excel sheet and see what our objective is. First transaction number 2 with this 561 is the pledges to be collected. So we're going to have pledges here that are going to be collected. We haven't yet received them. People are going to give us money. They've committed to giving us money. And therefore, we're going to track that. We want to track that as a receivable. And then the other side is going to go to contributions. Now here, we're going to put it into contributions with a restriction, given the fact that there's a time restriction on it. So in other words, we're increasing the receivable, an asset. We're increasing revenue, but we're putting a restriction on it. And you can think about that. Let's see what this will look like if we were to post this out. We're going to go back up top. We're going to say we have the receivable. We're going to have two types of receivables here. We got this one for the pledges versus the tuition. So within the pledges receivable, I'm going to say that this is going to be increasing in the debit direction. And then we're going to have the other side is kind of contributions with donor restrictions. So we're going to be in the contributions down below. It's going to be contributions with donor restrictions. We have the time restriction. We will then say equals, scroll up to that 561. So that's going to increase that in the credit direction. That, of course, increases basically the net income type of number as well. So how are we going to record that into QuickBooks? Let's go back to QuickBooks. We want to increase, in essence, a receivable type of account, and therefore we need to be going to the Create Invoice. We need to be careful here because we know the invoice will increase accounts receivable. However, we have two receivables now, and when that is the case, then we'll typically have this account field up here within the invoice because we have two receivable type of accounts. QuickBooks needs to differentiate between the two. So you need to be careful up top and go here and say, we're going to take this to the pledges receivable this time. We're going to call this the pledger 2, and that would be the name of the person pledging. We're just going to put a quick add again, focusing in on the activity, not all the detail of recording the customer type field, although you probably would want that in practice. We're going to focus here on the transactions. It's going to go into this one being restricted. And so I'm going to add a new class. Restricted is going to be the class, and I'm going to say tab. We're going to quick add that. So I'm going to say quick add. And then I'm going to tab through this, and we'll put this as of the 7th this time. And then we're going to need an item. So this is going to be a donation. And I have an item down here for donation restricted. That's the one we want. We have the donation restricted. Tabbing through that. We're going to pick up then the 836. Note that the amount actually should not be 836, but should be the 561. So I picked up the 836 down below. We're going to keep it at the 836. We're going to roll through this, and then at the end of this presentation, I'll show you how to go back in and adjust that from the financial statement side. 836. And then the class is going to be restricted here as well. Okay, so what's this going to do? We know it's an invoice. It's going to increase accounts receivable. It's going to increase the accounts receivable of pledges rather than tuitions because we have two of them now. Then the item's going to be driving where the other side will go. That item, where is it going? We can check that by going to the lists drop down. We can go to the item list. We want to check out the donation restricted. Double clicking on it. We then see that it's going to the account of contributions restricted. Income statement type of account, contributions restricted. Remember that you can have everything go into contributions and just simply use the classes to break out between restricted and unrestricted. I like to have them both there because it gives me kind of a double check as to whether I assign the right class, because by default, most people will put, you're just going to put unrestricted most of the time. And so to be able to default and break out between the two, I think is a good double check to have those two accounts. So I'm going to close this back out. So there we have that. It's going to go into the class of restricted, therefore create another column on our profit and loss by class report. And given it's a restricted item, we also want to track it by job. So we also want to think about the job report so that we can track the types of restrictions that we have. So to do that, I'm going to say save and close. So we're going to say save and close. and we'll say yes, and let's check all this stuff out. We're going to go to the trial balance first, reports drop down. We're going to go to the accounting and taxes, go first to our trusty trial balance. We're going to change the dates up top from 01/01/20 to 12/31/20. We'll change the font size by going to the customize reports, fonts and numbers, and then the change of the font to 11 for us here. I'm going to say okay, yes, and okay. And there's our font size changing. Then we've got the tuition and fees. That's not the one we want. We want the pledges receivable. Double clicking that. There's our 836 there. Closing this back out. The other side, if we go down to the profit and loss type of activity, we have the contributions that are restricted, the 836. There's our 836 there. Closing this back out. Let's now take a look at our profit and loss by class. If we select the drop down, we go to the company and financial. We want the profit and loss by class report, changing the dates up top from 01/01/20 to 12/31/20. And so there we have it. Now we have two classes. We have the restricted items and the unrestricted. Within the restricted items, we have the 836 in the restricted account. So we have two kind of things going on here. Again, you could put just one account for contributions and break out between the columns. I like to have two accounts, gives us that kind of double check. That's what we're talking about with that. Now note anything in the restricted items, we'd like to basically track by the jobs as well. So I'm going to track that to the job, and that's going to give us a breakout if we have multiple items that are restricted. So this restricted item, everything that's restricted is here. It doesn't tell us how it's restricted or why it's restricted. So if we want to break out the types of restrictions, then we're going to be using the job function within QuickBooks. So to check that out, we're going to go to the reports dropdown, company and financial. We're going to take a look at the profit and loss by job. Profit and loss by job, adjusting the dates up top from 01/01/20 to 12/31/20. So there we have this. Now we have the student 1 and student 2. And student 1 here, or student 2 has the restricted item. So this is the one, this is the job, this 836. Now, there's a couple ways we can break that out to basically know that. One, we know that because this number is in the contributions that are restricted. The other thing we can basically do to check to make this more clear on which items we're concentrating on here is to go to the customers dropdown, customer center. And then one way we can do it is say that this particular job, the restricted item, I like to put the jobs up top. I'm going to put the ones that I want to concentrate on up top. That'll make it read from left to right on the reports. So I'm going to grab this little diamond, pull it up top, and say I'd like to concentrate on these because this has some open information in it, open items in it. Then I'm going to grab this pledges, and I'm going to make it a subcategory. I'm going to grab the diamond and pull it inwards so that it's now a subcategory under the jobs. That's one thing we can do to it. The other, double clicking on that subcategory, we can then go to the job information and make that status as in progress. This allows us to filter by that status, by the job, and then say okay. And then we have the school supplies. If I double click on that, same kind of thing. And I would like to make the status here as in progress. And then okay. All right, so then if I close this back out and we go back to our profit and loss by job and we refresh this report, then, and I'm going to make this a little bit larger, we've got the pledges here, and now we have our job. So it's on the far left is the one we want. We're focusing on this item. This item ties out to what's on the profit and loss. So if I go to the profit and loss, there's our restricted items, the 836, and then we go to the jobs, we have the 836. Obviously, we only have one thing in there right now, so it's fairly easy to tie out, but if we had multiple things, then we can say multiple jobs, and we can collapse the jobs so that we can have the total column. The total column should tie out to the profit and loss by class, and we can collapse it and expand it to see the multiple jobs that will be in place. Now, note you can run the job report as well for like the life of the jobs, which in this case is 2 years. And you'll see then we have the jobs that we're concentrating on are the pledger jobs and the school supplies, because these two amounts are what is going to be eventually in the total equity section as if we go to the balance sheet, if we go to the reports drop down, company and financial, and take a look at the balance sheet standard and say we want this as of 12/31/20. This is the amount in the equity section where we have to break out between the temporary and the unrestricted. We need to put the amount in restricted that will be equivalent to the jobs. So if we can run the job report for the life of the jobs of those jobs that we're going to say are open, then we can basically tie this out to what should be in the temporary or the restricted versus the unrestricted equity section. The other way we can basically filter this report is because we don't really need this over here. This is all kind of noise on this side. We could filter it by that status that we set up. We can go to the customize reports up top. We can go to the filters. We can try to find, we can find the status. There is no try, do or do not. I'm going to go down to the status down here, job status, and then we're going to make that the in progress. And we'll say, okay. And so there it is. So now we just have those jobs that we're concentrating in on for this time period. Now I'm going to go back to the trial balance in the open windows, and we're actually going to make an adjustment now because the wrong number was picked up here, as you might have known. We're going to go to the Excel file. We picked up the 836, should be the 561. So how can we make an adjustment within QuickBooks? One of the easiest ways to do that is then go to the end result and go back to it. So if I go then to QuickBooks, we could then say, okay, let's go back to where that is going to be posted to. One area is the contributions restricted. There's that 836, double clicking on it. Then we're going to see the invoice to it. We can double click on that, and there's going to be our invoice. The other way that you can do this is probably the fastest way, is you're tempted to do this, and it works as well as to close this back out, is to go then to the home page, open up the invoice that the wrong amount was put in place, and then go back, use the back arrow until you find the proper invoice. Happens to be this one, the last one we entered. If it's not exactly the last one you entered, then it might be easier to go from the financial statements back than to use this function. Either should work, however. Now let's take a look and change this to the proper number, 561. So I'm going to change this out, 561. I do give a warning to, be careful of going back and changing things, but just note that QuickBooks is pretty allowing of that. So just be cautious if you're going to go back in time and adjust things. But the way to do it is to go to the financials and then go back typically and find the actual form that has been, the data had been entered into. Then we're going to say save and close. Yes. Yes here. I'm going to go back to the trial balance, and then there's our 561 within the contributions in the trial balance. Double clicking on it, there is our invoice now at the 561.